Coalition Relations Director at USBC, and I'm here with members of an advisory committee created to provide guidance on the planning and design of future USBC annual membership meeting and conferences. We value our partnership with you very much, and this committee developed a survey inviting your input about USBC future events. So today our committee members will be sharing with you the survey findings, informing you of the proposed plans, and inviting your feedback one more time. I'm thrilled to introduce our advisory committee members. Pauline Sakamoto serves on the USBC board and represents Havana on the at USBC. Brenda Reyes is also on the board. She's the chair of Crash Committee and is from Health Connect 1. Laurel Wilson has been on the board as well, serves on the board and is from CAPA. Kim Salas-Moore is our CPC, the Conference Program Committee co-chair for the 2018 conference, and she also represents the Navajo Tribal Coalition as well as the Intertribal Coalition of Phoenix. Christina Ratliff is our fearless leader, also representing the Crash Committee on this advisory board. Our other advisory group members are Helen Demas, who serves on the USBC's Membership Engagement Committee, and served also as the alternate rep for the Midwest region formerly. She is also from Health Connect 1. Jeanette Crenshaw is on the board. She's our immediate past chair and is from Lamaze. Our staff members on this advisory group are Camille Abbey, who's our conference and meetings manager, Danae Schmidt, our senior coalitions relations coordinator, and myself. So we, again, are so glad to have you all with us today for this special session. What are we discussing today? So to set the context, USBC's leadership has been, which is our board, has been very intentional about how we plan all of our programs as well as our priorities, and with central focus being on equity and inclusion. So you'll hear from Laurel Wilson and Pauline Sakamoto about our commitment to equity and inclusion. And then Danae will be sharing a little bit about what we heard from you from the surveys. And Kim Moore-Salas will also be talking about what after getting the input from you all, what did the advisory committee do about the findings? And then we hope Camille, our events location person, will be talking about the different location options we have shortlisted for the 2018 event. And you will be working with our advisory committee member, Christina, to vote for the top 2 locations. So with that, I'm going to give you, we would love to hear your comments during this session as well. So please use the control panel and the chat section to send comments even as the session is progressing, and we'll answer your questions. We'll keep some time for Q&A at the before the polls if there are questions as well. So we'll make sure to answer them on time. So on the right side of your screen, you should see a control panel. If you don't see it, it might be minimized. Just click on that orange tab and it'll pop back out. Scroll down and the section just under the audio is the questions tab. It's in blue. Click on the questions tab and it'll open up a text box for you to type your question in. Okay, if you have any audio or tech issues during this session, please email coalitions@usbreastfeeding.org and someone should be able to help you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laurel Wilson, our first panelist.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on. So, okay, can you put it to my first slide?
Sure, 1 second.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So the USBC's Equity Committee is called CRASH, and if you look on your screen, you'll see the mnemonic, and what it means is to consider culture, show respect, assess and affirm differences, show sensitivity and self-awareness, and do it all with humility. So the CRASH Committee was formed in 2013, and it was really designed to enhance the USBC governance, membership, personnel, and the coalition's ability to build structures, systems, and a culture of inclusiveness and mutual support for all of our USBC stakeholders. And currently, we have the amazing Brenda Reyes, who serves on the USBC board as one of the founding members of CRASH, and currently she's also our the chair on CRASH. Okay, you can go to the next slide, please. The CRASH Committee developed guidelines in 2014 that were pertaining to the overall USBC culture and functioning, and specifically for the 4 domains of governance, membership, personnel, and coalitions. And since that time, the USBC has been implementing many of these recommendations, and I'm going to go over what's been happening really for the past 3 years. So you can go to the next slide, please. I think there's one before that. No, wait a minute. I think there's supposed to be one before that, isn't there? About the website? Okay, here we go. So one of the very first efforts in equity was to increase the number of national organization member representatives. We originally had 2 and increased that to 4. And this allowed more stakeholders to engage at the national level of work. We offer the Tribal Trailblazer and Legacy Scholarship Awards to grassroots community workers from underrepresented communities. And this past year at the Coalition convening, we had an opportunity to hear from and meet some of these legacy awardees. And when I personally got to hear the stories and the work that they were doing, it made me feel so much more personally, deeply committed to the USBC mission. So you can actually visit the website, usbreastfeeding.org, to learn details about this work on improving diversity, equity, and inclusion at USBC. So once you're on the website, you just want to click on the first tab, About Us, to open the drop-down menu. And then you'll scroll down to the diversity, equity, and inclusion item. And here you can read our diversity value statement and review the CRASH recommendations in full. And if you're not already a member of the Racial Equity Learning Community, we invite you to do that right now. It's a really important group and it offers such a wealth of information. It's currently a forum to share resources, ask questions, and participate in the racial equity webinars that are offered every other month. And please share these far and wide. It's such great information. Okay, next slide, please. Starting in August of 2016, the USBC transitioned our in-person membership meetings from twice a year to once a year. And this opened up funds to make the Coalition's Conference an annual event instead of an every 2-year event. And this allowed for increased national state networking opportunities. We also added the January virtual membership meeting to stay in touch and allow for extended participation. And now I'm going to invite my fellow board member, Pauline Sakamoto, to chat with you.
Thanks, Laurel. So the inclusion progress to date, starting August 2016, entire membership meetings have been webcasted. Constellation groups no longer meet in person, but primarily virtually to maximize participation. Membership meeting format is 1 day in length, all general session, fostering whole group networking, learning, and sharing. And all member reps are encouraged to attend the National Breastfeeding Coalition's conferences. Plenary sessions and selected breakout sessions of the NBCC are webcasted as well. Next slide. So what's next on our list? So you can read that Crash Committee overall recommendation number 8 says to consider having membership meetings and coalition conferences in locations where greatest breastfeeding disparities exist to facilitate expanded participation. The Crash recommendation, I'm hearing beeping, is that okay? Okay. The Crash recommendation resulted in ongoing conversations by the board to revisit the structure of meetings and conferences. We also heard from you, loud and clear, that having a meeting and conference in the first week of August was not the best option for you. Since you are busy with WBW and National Breastfeeding Month activities, we explored the feasibility of alternating the schedule where the events are held in Washington, D.C. area in odd-numbered years, which is ideal timing for lobbying in the first year of a new Congress. The events travel in even numbers years to rotate around the other regions of the country. The board feels it would tie in well with USBC's mission, vision, values, and strategic framework, specifically those related to inclusion and engagement, targeted and meaningful communication for various audiences to maximize efficiency and the use of members' time and funds, better alignment of national, state, and local efforts in collaborative work, strengthening of partnerships and resource sharing across all of the Surgeon General's call to the breastfeeding topic areas and more, such as maternity care practices, lactation support, providers, workplace, donor milk, health professional education, formula marketing, and such. Sounds like a lot of collaboration and the ability to work together. The board was excited about this plan, but did not want to proceed without asking you. Next slide. So the advisory group, future meetings and convening ad hoc advisory group created survey inviting feedback from USBC stakeholders, including representatives from national member organizations, state, territorial, tribal, and local breastfeeding coalitions, and federal agencies on location, format, and timing. This advisory group consists of board members and representatives from CRASH, CPC, and Membership Engagement Committee. Once the survey was finalized, it was emailed to current members and coalition reps, as well as to all attendees of previous USBC member meetings and conferences since 2010. The survey was open for a month. 2 reminders were sent prior to close of survey. During October, members representing CRASH, Brenda Reyes and Christina, and CPC, Kim Moore-Salas, and National Organization Membership Engagement Committee, Helen Demas, were invited to serve on the future meetings and convenings ad hoc advisory group. Okay, next slide.
Alrighty, so that brings us to our survey findings. Okay, so we received about 78 responses, and while most of our respondents represented either a state territorial breastfeeding coalition or a national nonprofit member, we did receive responses from representatives of tribal coalitions, federal government agencies, and non-member organizations. And so that would be employees of hospitals and health departments. We wanted to know how many of our respondents had attended previous convenings. And so as you can see here, out of 78, we had 58 who had attended USBC membership meetings. So that's about 74% of our respondents. And then more than half had attended the 2 previous National Breastfeeding Coalitions conferences. So as Pauline mentioned, that we considered alternating locations for the annual USBC event, specifically in odd-numbered years versus another region during even-numbered years. And what we found was that 87% of respondents felt that they were somewhat to very likely to attend, or at least get their organization's support to attend, annual USBC events if we held them in different cities across the country. So we also have discussed whether to merge the membership meeting with the coalition's conference. And this is really to promote collective learning, networking, and action planning among all national, state, and local stakeholders. And so we found that 88 to 94% of our respondents were likely to attend a 2-day coalition conference with the USBC membership meeting merged into it. And so since its inception, the annual USBC event has been held during the first week of National Breastfeeding Month. And, you know, we understand the challenges some of you have with coming to DC during National Breastfeeding Month. And so we asked, and 70% of respondents were in favor of moving the USBC annual event to the month of June. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kim as she explains how we're putting these pieces together.
Hi, good morning. Thanks to all who participated in the survey and shared your thoughts and feedback about the location, format, and timing of USBC's membership meeting and coalition conferences. The advisory subgroup met twice in November to review the findings, drafted guidelines, and discuss location options for the 2018 meeting and conference. Okay. Location, odd years in DC, even years in cities across the U.S. As Pauline mentioned, the new Congress is elected in the odd years. So having our conference and meeting in DC will allow us to plan strong advocacy efforts on Capitol Hill. Format, combine member meeting with conference. We want to make sure that portions of the USBC membership meeting that were not accessible to conference participants are now offered to all. Timing, starting from 2019, hold USBC annual meeting and conference in June. We heard your feedback about MBCC timing in the survey, as well as in every year's conference evaluations. We recognize that it has been hard for you to be in DC. We have so many other local events planned during World Breastfeeding Week and National Breastfeeding Month. So per your preference, starting in 2019, USBC plans to schedule the annual membership meeting and conference in the first half of June. And as you can see, so see full guidance. I think, are we going to put up a link for that, or?
The link is in the chat box. So if you all click on the chat box, you'll see the link. Okay, I see that. So our advisory group combined the survey findings with recommendations from Crash Committee, USBC Board, suggestions made in conference evaluations, and from guidelines provided us by the first food racial equity cohort from the Center for Social Inclusion. We took all the stakeholder suggestions and developed a set of comprehensive guidelines that will inform the design and planning of the future in-person events. Just to name a few from the guidance, beginning in 2019, again, we mentioned scheduling the membership meeting the first half of June, design a flexible agenda with learning day ending at 4, so we can network and just kind of decompress with the, with the group. Another one is ensure diverse and non-traditional modalities for sharing, popular education, videos, poems, play, and storytelling. And you can read that on the guidance, the link that we provided. And let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to turn over to Danae, who will tell us about the locations for the 2019 meeting and conference, shortlisted by the advisory group.
Alrighty. So here's the list that the advisory has put together. So we have Albuquerque, New Mexico, Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, Illinois, Dallas, Texas, Memphis, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Phoenix, Arizona. So what we'd like to do now is just provide you all with some breastfeeding data, disparity data, as well as the information that Camille Abbey, our meeting and conference manager, has gathered on the travel and lodging for each of the proposed cities. As you can see here, first up is Albuquerque. So back in 2015, New Mexico earned a total infant score of 81. And according to the 2016 breastfeeding report card, the percent of infants in New Mexico, born in New Mexico in 2013, that had ever been breastfed was 85.5%. Looking at some local data, we see that Albuquerque reported 10.1% of the city's births were preterm births, which is higher than the March of Dimes 2020 goal of 8.1%. This corresponds to a C letter grade on the 2017 U.S. premature birth report card. And I'm going to ask Sarah to go ahead and chat out the link to the March of Dimes report so you all can actually see how they scale that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Camille, who's going to share with us some information on travel and lodging data for Albuquerque.
Thanks, Danae. So just to give you all a little bit of background about what we were thinking in putting this together for you, we wanted to think a little bit about how it impacts folks to get to all of these locations. So we looked at how easy, how convenient was it to take flights from major metropolitan areas. Now, that said, of course, a lot of attendees will not be coming from major metropolitan areas, but for the purposes of doing this top line survey, we really needed to have something to compare apples to apples. So we compared how easy is it to get there. Then we looked at how are the costs of those flights. So in some markets, for example, Albuquerque, the flight cost tends to be a little bit higher than average. It also tends to be the case that there are less nonstop flights to Albuquerque than there are to some of our other location market opportunities. However, when you get to Albuquerque, it tends to be the case that our food costs and our room costs are lower than average. So that's based on just different market values and how they, excuse me, banging my desk, how they compare with each other. So what we wanted to look at was a rating system to kind of compare these all across the board. So you'll see that you get a number of pluses. You get less pluses if your travel is inconvenient. So in the case of travel, there was 1 plus and 1 plus. And then for food costs, you get more pluses because those costs are lower than average. So in this case, Albuquerque ranked about 8 out of 12 possible points. Now, that being said, I did put an asterisk next to possible points because all of these things are approximate. So within each market, there's going to be a range of hotel offers that we might be able to solicit. But because we have such an extensive list here, that's really why we're soliciting your preferences so that we can then dive much deeper and get the best possible opportunities for our attendees. So I also wanted to put a couple of notes in each of our slides. So the one about Albuquerque says, basically Albuquerque is going to require a flight connection for many people, but it might be one of our less expensive options once we're there as far as the food and the lodging. So it's also one of our 2 locations closest to the West Coast. So for folks who are considering that, since many of the attendees have been, well, all of the attendees from the West Coast have been going to DC for all these years. So that's a consideration for some, for sure. And as well, there's some charming neighborhoods for dinners out. So for ease of walking and convenience, that was one other thing we were thinking of, is it's not only the cost of food in the hotels that impacts our attendees, it's cost once you set outside the door and need to have dinner or have transportation to the airport. So you'll see the notes on each of these slides will vary just depending on what might have been of interest. Danae, I'll pass it back to you for our next market.
Awesome. Okay, so next up is Atlanta. So looking at the data, we see that Georgia earned a total NPING score of 75. And according to the 2016 breastfeeding report card, the percent of infants born in Georgia in 2013 that had ever breastfed was 69.2%. Atlanta reported that 10.4% of the city's births were preterm, which is also higher than the March of Dimes 2020 goal of 8.1%. And this actually corresponds to a D letter grade on the 2017 U.S. premature birth report card. The percent of infants born at low birth weight, specifically in Fulton County, is currently at 11%, which is higher than both the state and national averages. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Camille to give us some more information on Atlanta's travel and lodging data.
Thanks, Danae. So as you might imagine, Atlanta is a pretty major airport hub, so they rank pretty well in the nonstop flights category, and the costs as such are also lower than average. So they did pretty well there as well. Lodging costs tend to sometimes be a bit higher than average, just because of that market. However, I will say that because there are a lot of large hotels in Atlanta, we may be able to get some very competitive rates because of it being August, so because of the time of year. The room costs are about average. They're not, it depends once again, whether or not we're gonna get very competitive rates or not. I will say that Atlanta has a very easy metro ride from the airport to downtown hotels. There's also a lot of airport hotels that have nice, easy shuttles to downtown if folks wanted to take them out for their evening dining possibilities, and a few other different suburbs that have really nice hotel areas. So it's a pretty big market to explore, but it has ranked in our little scoring system up a total of 9 out of 12 possible points. Danae?
All right, so next up is Chicago. So Illinois back in 2015 earned a total MPING score of 81. And according to the 2016 breastfeeding report card, the percent of infants born in Illinois in 2013 that had ever breastfed was 81.1%. Looking at some local data, Chicago reported that 10.9% of the city's births were preterm births. Again, that's higher than the March of Dimes 2020 goal of 8.1%, and that corresponds to a D letter grade on the 2017 U.S. premature birth report card. Also, looking at county level data, the percent of infants born at low birth weight in Cook County is currently at 9%, and that's slightly higher than both the state and national averages. So I'm going to turn it back over to Camille to give us some more information on Chicago's travel and lodging data.
So as you could imagine, with two major airports, Chicago O'Hare and Midway in Chicago, the ease and convenience of flights to Chicago is just, sky high. So really ranked very highly there, as do a few of our markets. The cost of flights tend to be lower than average because it is such a huge hub for so many airlines. However, as far as lodging and food and room costs go, it is definitely higher than average, just generally speaking. It gave us a total of 8 out of 12 possible points. A couple of other notes about Chicago is, one is that this is actually Lollapalooza weekend in Chicago, so I've already seen some pretty dramatic spikes as far as the hotel pricing. Doesn't mean we won't be able to find something, but if we are also willing to be out of the downtown area, we might have a few more options there as well, as long as we are flexible with that. Just again, there are many non-stop flight options available from across the country. So Chicago has definitely a lot going in the ease department, and some other considerations as well. Danae?
All right, next up is Dallas. So Texas received its last MPING score of 77. And according to the 2016 breastfeeding report card, the percent of infants born in Texas in 2013 that had ever breastfed was 81.9%. Looking at local data, Dallas reported that 8.4% of the city's births were preterm, and that's slightly above the March of Dimes goal, 2020 goal of 8.1%. And this corresponds to a B letter grade on the U.S. premature birth report card. Looking at county level data, Dallas County is currently at 8% for low birth weight, and that's right at the state and national averages. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Camille for some lodging and travel data on Dallas.
So Dallas also it's got two pretty major airports, Dallas Fort Worth and Love Field. So we've got two great airport options, keeping the ease and convenience at a very high ranking, and as well the cost of flights tends to be lower than average. So, you know, not too many connections required for folks to get there from many major market areas. As far as lodging goes, the food and room costs are about average, I would say. So it puts Dallas at about 10 out of 12 possible points. Couple notes, Dallas obviously really big, so there's a lot to explore. So we have, you know, there is downtown, but there's also the possibility of Fort Worth with a nice walking area. And, you know, again, just many nonstop flights from both East Coast and West Coast. You may have noticed that I'm really saying something positive about each of our markets, and I find that that's because the group came up with such a great list for us. I really think there is something positive to say about each of these markets. So hopefully I've managed to convey that, but I want to just specify that's my intention, really to remain as neutral as possible while highlighting some of the pluses and some challenges in each of our markets for consideration. Passing it back to you, Danae.
Okay, next up is Memphis. So in 2015, Tennessee earned a total NPING score of 72. And according to the 2016 breastfeeding report card, the percent of infants born in Tennessee in 2013 that had ever breastfed was 71.1%. 71.1%, yeah. Okay, so Memphis reported that 13.3% of the city's births were preterm births, and that corresponds to an F letter grade on the U.S. premature birth report card. The percent of infants born at low birth weight in Shelby County is currently at 11%, and that's higher than both the state and national averages. Right, I'm going to turn it back over to Camille.
So as far as Memphis goes, it is one of our less convenient markets to get to. So most folks will need to take a connecting flight, and the flights will cost more than average. As far as room and board, lodging costs are about average. The food and the room costs are about average. I think we can find some that will probably rank a bit better. But again, that will be at the deep dive phase if Memphis is one of the markets selected. So it resulted in a possible 6 out of 12 possible points right now. Again, reiterating the one-stop flights would be necessary, and notably, there, according to the airlift report, we are lacking non-stop flight options from many of our metro areas, and most notably, I thought impacting our attendees might be DC, Boston, Seattle, and Philly. So something to bear in mind, but as you heard from Danae, obviously an area with many disparities worthy of consideration. Danae?
Thanks, Camille. All right, so next is New Orleans. So in 2015, Louisiana earned a total NPING score of 76. And according to the breastfeeding report card in 2016, the percent of infants born in Louisiana in 2013 that had ever breastfed was 60.9%. Just looking at the breastfeeding rate, other breastfeeding rates, we see that less than half of the infants in Louisiana are breastfeeding at 6 and 12 months. And less than half of the infants are exclusively breastfeeding past 3 months. Looking at local data, New Orleans reported that 11.9% of the city's births were preterm, and that also corresponds to an F letter grade on the U.S. premature birth report card. The percent of infants born at low birth weight at the county level is currently at 11%, which is higher than both the state and national averages. So Camille, if you'll give us some information on the travel and lodging data for New Orleans.
My pleasure. So with New Orleans, it pretty much varies. It really does depend on where you're coming from. You know, so that resulted in kind of the 2+ score. So it's neither one end nor the other of the spectrum. And the cost of flights, I would say, is also about average for many and most. Food costs, room costs, similarly about average. Good time of year to be there, resulted in a total of 8 out of 12 possible points, again, approximate. Many of the hotels are about 20 to 25 minutes from the airport. Something to note is there's, as far as hotel people think, so forgive me, some of the renovations were post-Katrina, so that's been about, 12 years. So there's a little bit of a need of renovation in some cases. So again, if New Orleans is selected, we'll definitely be looking really closely and working with folks that live in that area to get their input as well. As with all of these markets, we would do the same, really wanting to connect with everyone on the ground where they are, so we can tap into that wisdom. Danae?
Okay, and last but not least, we have Phoenix, Arizona. So in 2015, Arizona earned a total INPING score of 79. And according to the breastfeeding report card released in 2016, the percent of infants born in Arizona in 2013 that had ever breastfed was 85%. Phoenix reported that 9.6% of the city's births were preterm, and that corresponds to a C letter grade on the U.S. premature birth report card. And at the county level, the percent of infants born at low birth weight in Maricopa County is currently at 7%. That's the same as their state's average and lower than the national average. And so Camille, if you'll give us our final data section on this city's travel and lodging.
Yeah, Phoenix. So Phoenix is very easy from the West Coast. Lots of nonstop options. Also from the East Coast, not bad either. So we put that at about average. The cost of flights also about average. Food costs tend to be a little bit lower than average. Also room costs a little bit lower, particularly because it's summer. So that obviously impacts us in all markets, wherever we are in a time of year. So that puts us at 10 out of 12 possible points. Again, because of the time of year, the hotel rates we think are going to be pretty competitive. They're looking pretty good there. It is the closest option, worthy of note, to the West Coast, and yet there are many flights from the East Coast that are nonstop as well. So no need for a connection there. So Danae, do you want to take us to our next slide? So we wanted to give you a little bit of a recap because this is a lot of information on which to be making, your decisions. So we just wanted to list out where we would net out, top line on some of these. So based on disparities and on this disparities data, the ranking would be Memphis, New Orleans, Atlanta, Chicago, Albuquerque, Phoenix, and Dallas. If we were thinking about centrality based on geography, Memphis, New Orleans, and Chicago, with a very close Atlanta and Dallas being pretty close to that sort of central corridor as well, if you're thinking of it that way. Being considerate of our West Coast attendees, there's a lot of travel involved, so we're trying to be sensitive to that. Top three overall based on ease of travel in our points rating system would be Dallas and Phoenix would be tied, and Atlanta would come in second. And as far as the ease and cost of travel, so the cost as well, would be Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas. So those are considerations, and obviously everyone's going to have their own weighting mechanism, and we really value that. So we wanted to just give you some information, but really rely on you to tell us what speaks to you the most, and then we can go from there afterwards. So I'd like to pass it over to Christina Ratliff, who I think is going to invite you to your voting.
Okay, thank you, Camille, and welcome everyone. So yeah, we're really excited to hear feedback from everyone and to hear what your opinion is. And so we're going to be opening the lines in a few moments so that we can do the poll.
Okay, and that poll has just been chatted to you.
Okay, perfect. Great. So the poll is now open. Is that chatted? Okay, it's chatted to everyone. So that is live. So if you could kindly go and please let us know your rankings. We'd greatly appreciate it. And we'll give you just a few moments to do so.
And we're about halfway with all of our participants, so just make sure you click on that link and submit your vote.
For those of you who are chatting your responses in the chat box, do go and put it in the poll as well. So it won't be counted otherwise. So be sure to also state it in the poll.
Okay, how are you looking, Danae? Are we almost there at 100%? Close to it?
Almost. We're almost at 100%. I'm going to give you guys about 30 more seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and reveal the results.
Perfect.
Denise, are you seeing the chats in the box about, so make sure
All right.
we count those.
Yep, I sent them the poll info.
Okay.
Can you hang
Would
on?
you like me to
Can you
keep it?
hold on for like a minute while I direct the people?
Yes, no problem.
If this is Kinkini, I just wanted to make sure if your state has any using public health funds for travel to any of these cities, just make sure you're putting that into consideration too. We have a comment from California which says California is restricting publicly funded travel to few states because of recent laws there, discriminatory laws. So if your state has anything like that, be sure to keep that in mind as you cast your ballot.
And we're still waiting on about 20 people to vote.
We can close it if our people we have about 80% of the attending folks voting.
We do. So we can close it. I'm going to go ahead and close it. All righty. So here are our results.
Kim, are you able to announce the top two? Oh, let's see.
I see a tie. Am I reading this right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be the top two, right? Atlanta, Georgia, and Chicago, Illinois are our top two votes.
All righty.
We'll take a few questions. We have a few questions that I just want to answer. This is Kinkini, and we had questions about if so what I hear from Kim is that we have ties for the first place, which is Atlanta and Chicago, and then
Yes.
and then Dallas and Albuquerque also got 7 points. Okay, and so yes, we will make sure that this is not on any no-go places for any of the states. But as of now, we have 4 cities as options. So one of these 4 will be our next USBC venue for our next annual meeting and conference. Thank you all for voting, and we'll keep you posted about and get your feedback too during the planning process. So thanks again, and I'm going to answer a few questions. We had questions about if the timing changes, how will the advocacy day happen, and what will, when it's around the rest of the country, what will it mean? And I wanted to say that, yes, in June, we'll still be doing, when we are in DC, we'll be doing Robust Advocacy Day as planned. When we are in other parts of the country, we will also be using the Advocacy Day to do with your input again. It's still going to be designed, but we'll be doing intense advocacy ambassadorship training, our campaign materials, like how to host your elected reps, how to visit. So we'll do some intense advocacy training, so that'll give you ideas, plans, concrete steps to activities to do in preparation for a National Breastfeeding Month. So the advocacy will still, even in June, will be a big part of as an add-on to the conference and meeting. So yeah, that portion of our work will not go away anywhere. In fact, we think that in June, if we do it, it might even give us an opportunity to coordinate better for state, federal, and local efforts so that we can have more impact during National Breastfeeding Month. And another question is, yeah. What were some of the reasoning behind choosing these locations? We wanted to make sure that with locations that we could have them central, that they tied in with our mission, and that we could keep our reg rates as low as possible, so that we were very making sure, because our registration rates are often connected to the food and hotel costs. Yes, so all of these options would have been great. So thank you. The 2018 meeting will be in August. The timing will change starting 2019. All right, that's the last of the questions. So thanks everyone on behalf of the advisory committee. Kim.
Yes, thank you everyone for being part of a big decision. We are definitely committed to creating welcome, meaningful, and vibrant networking and opportunities at our in-person events. So again, on behalf of the advisory group, want you to know that USBC will continue to seek your input and make our events productive for all stakeholders.
Thanks everyone, and we have about a 10-minute, thank you, Kim, thanks to all the members of our advisory committee that have worked so hard to put this together to get these thoughtful guidelines. And so we have about 10 minutes before we go into our next session, which is our 222. So we'll keep the lines open. We'll stop broadcasting, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. So thanks, everybody. See you at the next session.
Thank you.